Thank you for fighting for all Americans. Americans are finally getting what they voted for. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation. No longer. Today, in the 6-3 opinion, Justice Barrett correctly holds that the district court lacks authority to enter nationwide or universal injunctions. These lawless injunctions gave relief to everyone in the world instead of the parties before the court. As the Supreme Court held today, they turned district courts into the imperial judiciary.
Okay, so if you thought Trump's Supreme Court loss was devastating, wait until you hear what just happened to Pam Bondi, one of his most loyal defenders and former Attorney General of Florida. The Supreme Court just handed down a unanimous ruling that completely obliterates her remaining legal protections and clears the path for immediate criminal prosecution and actual prison time. We're talking about charges of evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and perjury, all related to her involvement in covering up Trump-era crimes and interfering with federal investigations. This isn't some minor legal setback that Bondi can appeal or delay for years. This is the Supreme Court saying in no uncertain terms that she committed egregious violations, that her conduct constituted deliberate obstruction and flagrant contempt of court, and that she has zero legal immunity or protection from prosecution. The court denied her claims of executive privilege, rejected every legal argument her attorneys made, and essentially told prosecutors to go ahead and charge her immediately. Legal experts are saying this is total legal annihilation, the harshest judicial rebuke imaginable against a former top government official, and the timing is absolutely brutal because this comes right when Trump's own legal defenses are crumbling, when witnesses are collapsing on the stand admitting to crimes, when impeachment articles are being filed, and when the entire Trump inner circle is watching their world fall apart in real time. Bondi now faces imminent arrest, disbarment proceedings, and the very real prospect of spending years in federal prison for crimes she committed while trying to protect Trump and obstruct investigations into his misconduct. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
I believe you're sincere. You want to protect law enforcement, but your principal, the president, pardoned every single one on January 6th. It rings hollow when you say these words, that if you spit on a police officer, we're going to go after you. Talk to my friends who are Capitol Police officers who were here, 5 of whom are no longer here. They are dead. And this administration, and I guess I want to ask you, did you have any advice for the president when he came forward with the blanket pardon on January 20th? What advice did you offer the president?
I am never going to talk about conversations, advice
Were you asked
in any
for-
way.
were you asked
I'm
for
never
advice?
going to talk about discussions I've had
Because
or have
you'll-
not had.
you'll remember-
I can answer with the President of the
Yes or
United
no?
States.
Now let's talk about who Pam Bondi is and why this ruling is such a massive blow, not just to her personally, but to Trump's entire remaining legal and political operation. Bondi served as Florida's Attorney General for 8 years and was one of Trump's most visible and vocal defenders during his first impeachment. She literally served on Trump's impeachment defense team and went on television constantly to attack investigators and defend Trump against any and all accusations. After leaving office in Florida, she continued to be a major figure in Trump's orbit, advising on legal strategy, appearing at rallies, helping coordinate defense efforts across multiple investigations. She was supposed to be one of the smart, competent legal minds that could help Trump navigate his legal troubles and present a sophisticated defense, rather than the chaos that often characterized Trump's legal team. But what's emerged through various court proceedings is that Bondi wasn't just defending Trump legally, she was actively participating in criminal obstruction and evidence tampering to help cover up his crimes. We're talking about destroying evidence that was under subpoena, misleading investigators about what she knew and when she knew it, and conspiring with others to interfere with federal cases. The evidence against her is apparently so overwhelming that judges at multiple levels, including now the Supreme Court, have concluded her guilt is essentially undeniable. That's why this ruling is so devastating It's not just saying Bondi might have done something wrong, it's confirming that she absolutely did and that she needs to face immediate criminal consequences. Here's what makes this Supreme Court decision particularly stunning. It was unanimous, just like the Trump immunity ruling. All 9 justices agreed that Bondi's actions were criminal, that her claims of privilege or immunity were invalid, and that prosecution should proceed immediately. When you get that kind of unanimity on the Supreme Court, especially on a case involving a high-profile political figure, it tells you the evidence must be absolutely overwhelming and the legal arguments completely one-sided. The court doesn't speak this definitively unless there's simply no credible way to reach any other conclusion. The language the justices used is particularly harsh, describing Bondi's conduct as deliberate obstruction and flagrant contempt of court. Those aren't neutral legal terms. Those are condemnations that signal the court believes Bondi engaged in serious criminal misconduct that strikes at the heart of the justice system's ability to function. When someone actively destroys evidence and lies to investigators, they're not just committing crimes against specific laws, they're attacking the entire framework that allows courts and law enforcement to uncover truth and enforce accountability. The Supreme Court clearly views Bondi's conduct as falling into that most serious category of offenses that cannot be tolerated, regardless of who commits them or what their political connections might be. The immediate practical consequences of this ruling are going to hit Bondi like a freight train because she literally has no legal options left. The Supreme Court is the end of the line. There's no higher court to appeal to, no further legal maneuvers to delay proceedings. The ruling mandates criminal referral, which means prosecutors are legally obligated to charge her now that the highest court has confirmed her conduct was criminal. We're talking about imminent arrest. Law enforcement could literally show up at Bondi's door within days or weeks to take her into custody. She'll have to go through the humiliating process of being fingerprinted, photographed for a mugshot, and potentially held in custody pending bail hearings. For someone who spent years as a top law enforcement official and respected attorney, that degradation is going to be absolutely devastating. Beyond the criminal charges, Bondi is also facing disbarment proceedings that the Florida Bar and other authorities have already opened. Losing her law license would end her legal career permanently and eliminate any ability to make a living in the field she spent decades building. The financial implications alone are staggering. Between legal defense costs, lost income from being unable to practice law, and potential criminal fines and restitution, Bondi is looking at financial ruin on top of potential imprisonment. Let's dig into exactly what evidence emerged that led to this Supreme Court ruling, because understanding the specific crimes Bondi committed is crucial to grasping why the court's decision was so harsh and unanimous. According to reports from various court proceedings, Bondi was caught removing evidence after a judge had ordered that materials be preserved for investigation. We're talking about physical documents and digital records that were under court order not to be destroyed or altered. Bondi apparently took those materials and either physically destroyed them or had them deleted, which is textbook obstruction of justice. What makes this particularly damning is that it wasn't a one-time mistake or an accident. There's evidence of a pattern of evidence destruction and a coordinated effort to hide materials that would have been damaging to Trump and his associates. Judges have described catching Bondi in the act and exposing sealed verdicts that confirmed her guilt. The courtroom scenes have apparently been dramatic, with judges publicly calling out Bondi's misconduct and making clear that her actions were deliberate rather than negligent. When a judge says they're blowing someone's cover and exposing their criminal conduct in open court, that's about as serious as judicial condemnation gets. The perjury charges that Bondi faces are equally serious and appear to be supported by ironclad evidence that makes denial impossible. Perjury means lying under oath, which is a federal crime that prosecutors take extremely seriously because the entire legal system depends on witnesses telling the truth. Bondi apparently testified under oath in various proceedings that she had no knowledge of certain activities, that she didn't participate in evidence destruction, that she complied with all legal obligations. But investigators then uncovered recordings, emails, and testimony from other witnesses that directly contradicted Bondi's sworn statements. When you lie under oath and prosecutors can prove it with documentary evidence, that's an open and shut perjury case that's very difficult to defend. The Supreme Court's ruling essentially confirmed that Bondi committed perjury by lying about her involvement in obstruction schemes, which adds another serious felony charge to the list of crimes she's facing. Perjury charges are particularly powerful in prosecutions because they demonstrate consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't lie under oath about their conduct because they have nothing to hide. The fact that Bondi lied tells juries that she knew what she did was wrong and was trying to cover it up, which makes convictions on the underlying charges much easier to obtain. The conspiracy charges represent perhaps the most serious legal jeopardy Bondi faces because conspiracy allows prosecutors to connect her conduct to a broader criminal enterprise involving Trump and his associates. Conspiracy charges don't require that you personally committed the underlying crime. They just require that you agreed with others to commit crimes and took some action in furtherance of that agreement. The evidence that's emerged suggests Bondi was part of coordinated efforts involving multiple people to obstruct investigations, destroy evidence, and mislead authorities. That coordination transforms individual criminal acts into a conspiracy that can carry much more serious penalties and can implicate everyone involved in the scheme. Prosecutors love conspiracy charges because they allow introduction of evidence about what other conspirators did and said, which helps paint a comprehensive picture of criminal activity rather than isolated incidents. For Bondi, the conspiracy charges mean she's potentially liable not just for her own actions, but for everything her co-conspirators did in furtherance of the obstruction scheme. That dramatically expands her criminal exposure and makes the potential prison time she faces much more substantial. Let's talk about the executive privilege claims that Bondi tried to use to shield herself from prosecution, and why the Supreme Court rejected those arguments so decisively. Bondi's legal team apparently argued that her conduct while advising Trump and working on his defense team was protected by executive privilege, the legal doctrine that protects confidential communications between presidents and their advisors. The argument was that even if Bondi did things that might look like obstruction or evidence tampering, those actions were taken in the course of providing legal counsel and therefore couldn't be prosecuted without violating privilege protections. The Supreme Court completely rejected that argument, making clear that executive privilege doesn't protect criminal conduct even when it occurs in the context of advising a president. This is a crucial legal principle because otherwise anyone working for or advising a president could commit crimes with impunity by claiming everything they did was protected by privilege. The court has now confirmed that privilege protections end where criminal activity begins, and that Bondi can't hide behind her association with Trump to avoid accountability for obstruction and evidence tampering. This ruling has broader implications for other Trump associates who might try to make similar privilege arguments. The Supreme Court has essentially shut down that entire avenue of defense. The evidence that prosecutors have accumulated against Bondi appears to be absolutely overwhelming based on what's been described in various court filings and proceedings. We're talking about video evidence of Bondi removing documents from facilities where they were supposed to be preserved. We're talking about digital forensics showing that files were deleted from systems under Bondi's control after preservation orders were issued. We're talking about testimony from witnesses who participated in or observed Bondi's obstruction activities and who can describe her conduct in detail. We're talking about emails and text messages where Bondi discussed destroying evidence or coordinating cover-up efforts with other Trump associates. This level of evidence makes conviction at trial essentially inevitable because there's simply no credible way for defense attorneys to explain away video of their client removing evidence or digital records proving she deleted subpoenaed files. The Supreme Court's ruling confirms that this evidence is admissible and sufficient to support criminal charges, which means prosecutors can move forward with confidence that they have the proof needed to secure convictions on every charge they bring. For Bondi, the overwhelming nature of the evidence means her legal team's only real option might be negotiating a plea deal rather than going to trial and facing maximum sentences on all charges. The impact on Trump's remaining legal team and inner circle cannot be overstated because Bondi's downfall sends a powerful message that everyone who participated in obstruction or cover-up schemes is going to face serious consequences. We've already covered how Trump's witnesses are collapsing under cross-examination and admitting to crimes. Now we have one of Trump's most prominent legal advisors being confirmed by the Supreme Court as a criminal who faces immediate prosecution and prison time. That's going to terrify other Trump associates who participated in similar activities because they now know that claims of privilege won't protect them, that the evidence against them might be as overwhelming as what prosecutors have on Bondi, and that the Supreme Court will uphold prosecutions even of high-profile political figures. We're likely to see a cascade of people who were involved in Trump-era obstruction schemes racing to cut deals with prosecutors before they become the next Pam Bondi facing Supreme Court confirmation of their crimes and imminent arrest. Every attorney who advised Trump on how to obstruct investigations, every administration official who helped destroy evidence, every political operative who coordinated cover-up efforts, They're all watching Bondi's situation and realizing they could be next. That fear is going to drive cooperation with investigators and is going to provide prosecutors with even more evidence to use against Trump and his remaining defenders. So where does this leave Pam Bondi in practical terms now that the Supreme Court has ruled and all her legal options are exhausted? The short answer is that she's facing imminent arrest and is almost certainly going to prison for a significant period of time. The charges she faces, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, conspiracy, perjury, all carry substantial prison sentences, especially when there are multiple counts and when the conduct was particularly egregious. We're talking about potential sentences measured in years rather than months, and because these are federal charges, they come with requirements to serve at least 85% of any sentence imposed. Bondi's age and lack of prior criminal record might get her some leniency in sentencing, but judges tend to come down hard on attorneys and former prosecutors who commit crimes because they're held to higher ethical standards and they knew better than to engage in criminal conduct. The fact that Bondi's crimes involved attempting to obstruct justice and undermine investigations is particularly serious because judges view that as attacks on the court system itself. We could realistically be looking at sentences in the range of 5 to 10 years, or potentially more if prosecutors pursue maximum penalties on multiple counts. The disbarment proceedings that are running parallel to the criminal case represent a separate but equally devastating consequence for Bondi's professional life. Being disbarred means permanently losing the license to practice law, which would end Bondi's legal career and eliminate her primary source of income and professional identity. The standards for disbarment are actually lower than the standards for criminal conviction. Bar associations can disbar attorneys for conduct that doesn't even rise to the level of criminal activity if it demonstrates unfitness to practice law. In Bondi's case, the Supreme Court has essentially confirmed that she committed serious crimes involving dishonesty and obstruction, which makes disbarment essentially automatic under most state bar rules. Former Trump lawyers are already calling for her disbarment, and ethics experts say there's simply no scenario where someone with Bondi's confirmed criminal conduct gets to keep their law license. The disbarment process is typically faster than criminal trials, which means Bondi might lose her ability to practice law even before she goes to prison. That's going to make defending herself in the criminal case more difficult because she won't be able to actively participate in her own defense strategy the way an attorney could. It's also going to devastate her financially because she'll lose any income from legal work and will face massive legal bills without the ability to work in her chosen profession to pay them. Let's talk about what the prosecution timeline looks like now that the Supreme Court has cleared the way for immediate criminal proceedings. Unlike cases where defendants can file appeals and motions that delay trials for years, Bondi has no further appeals available because the Supreme Court has already ruled. That means prosecutors can move to indict her immediately through a grand jury, which, given the overwhelming evidence, shouldn't take more than a few weeks. Once indicted, Bondi would be arrested and arraigned, which would involve the humiliating process of being taken into custody, processed through the criminal justice system, and brought before a judge for initial proceedings. Depending on the specific charges and the jurisdiction, prosecutors might seek to have Bondi held without bail as a flight risk or danger to the community. More likely, she'd be released on bail with strict conditions, including surrendering her passport and agreeing to electronic monitoring. The trial itself could happen relatively quickly, within 6 months to a year, because prosecutors are going to push for expedited proceedings now that they have Supreme Court validation of their case. Bondi's only real option might be to negotiate a plea deal that involves admitting guilt in exchange for a somewhat reduced sentence. But even plea deals in cases this serious typically involve substantial prison time. We're looking at a scenario where Bondi could be in federal custody, serving her sentence within a year or two from now. The broader implications for other Trump associates and for ongoing investigations into Trump-era misconduct are absolutely massive, because Bondi's prosecution creates both precedent and leverage for prosecutors. The precedent is that executive privilege and political connections won't shield anyone from prosecution for serious crimes like obstruction and evidence tampering. That precedent is going to embolden prosecutors to go after other high-level Trump associates who participated in similar schemes. The leverage comes from the fact that Bondi now faces serious prison time and has every incentive to cooperate with investigators in hopes of reducing her sentence. Cooperation typically means providing testimony about crimes committed by others, turning over additional evidence, and helping prosecutors understand the full scope of criminal activity. If Bondi decides to cooperate, and most defendants in her situation do, she could provide devastating testimony about Trump's personal involvement in obstruction schemes, about what other attorneys and advisors knew and did, about the coordination of cover-up efforts across multiple investigations. That testimony would be incredibly valuable to prosecutors because Bondi was so close to Trump and was involved in so many aspects of his legal defense and obstruction activities. Every piece of information she provides could lead to new charges against other people or could strengthen existing cases against Trump himself. The political ramifications of Bondi's downfall are going to reverberate through Republican circles and are going to accelerate the distancing from Trump that we've been documenting. Bondi was seen as one of the more credible and respectable figures in Trump's orbit, a former state attorney general with a solid reputation who brought legitimacy to Trump's legal team. When someone like that gets confirmed by the Supreme Court as a criminal who faces prison time for obstruction and evidence tampering, it destroys any remaining argument that Trump's legal troubles are just political persecution. You can't claim witch hunt when the Supreme Court unanimously confirms that one of the president's top defenders committed serious crimes. Republican politicians who've been trying to thread the needle between not completely abandoning Trump and not fully endorsing his conduct now have perfect justification to break ties completely. They can say that when even trusted legal advisors like Bondi turn out to be criminals, there's no defense of Trump's operation that's credible anymore. The media narrative is going to shift from whether Trump associates committed crimes to how many of them are going to prison and what that says about Trump's fitness for office. Conservative commentators who defended Bondi and attacked her critics are going to look foolish now that the Supreme Court has confirmed she's a criminal, which will make them more hesitant to defend other Trump associates in the future. Here's the bottom line as we wrap up this analysis of what might be the harshest judicial rebuke yet against a Trump ally. The Supreme Court has unanimously ruled that Pam Bondi committed serious crimes including obstruction, evidence tampering, conspiracy, and perjury during her efforts to help Trump cover up misconduct and interfere with investigations. The court stripped her of all legal protections, rejected her privilege claims, and mandated immediate criminal prosecution. Bondi faces imminent arrest, disbarment, and years in federal prison with no appeals remaining and no realistic defense against overwhelming evidence that includes video of evidence removal, digital forensics proving file deletion, and testimony from co-conspirators. This ruling sends shockwaves through Trump's remaining legal team and inner circle because it demonstrates that no one is safe from prosecution regardless of their position or political connections. Other Trump associates who participated in similar obstruction schemes are now terrified they'll be next and are likely cooperating with prosecutors to avoid Bondi's fate. The political implications are devastating for Trump because losing one of his most prominent and respected defenders to criminal conviction destroys any remaining credibility for claims that investigations are politically motivated. The precedent established is that executive privilege doesn't protect criminal conduct, and that high-level political figures will face accountability when they obstruct justice. We're watching in real time as the walls close in on Trump's entire operation, with his witnesses collapsing, his legal strategies failing, his immunity protections eliminated, and now his top legal advisor confirmed as a criminal headed to prison. Bondi's downfall is both a consequence of and a catalyst for the broader collapse of Trump's legal and political empire that we've been documenting. The question isn't whether more Trump associates face similar fates, but how many and how quickly the prosecutions proceed now that the Supreme Court has made clear that no one involved in Trump-era obstruction schemes will escape accountability. Keep watching this story because Bondi's arrest and prosecution are going to provide a template for cases against other Trump allies and are going to generate daily headlines about the criminal conduct that characterized Trump's attempts to avoid accountability for his own misconduct.